Chicago.
Hello, I'm Nathan. Welcome to another episode of Bridging Chicago. You can find the Bridging Chicago podcast by going to www.bridgingchicago.com, by visiting our Instagram and Twitter, where our handle is @bridgingchicago, or by following us on LinkedIn. Today, I am joined by Jacqueline Ruiz. Jacqueline is a 29-time author, entrepreneur, and pilot. Jacqueline, thanks so much for joining us today.
I am beyond excited to be here with you and excited to have this conversation. Thank you for opening up this beautiful space for us.
Yeah, we were talking a little before we started recording here, and I was saying I just love your energy, your vibe, your spirit. It just is like contagious because I'm like so excited for what we're about to hear and learn from you.
Thank you. You know what? When I was pretty young, starting my career, a mentor told me that I
Hmm.
had to tone it down on the
Oh,
energy. And I sat in my car and I cried. And then I called another mentor who had built a $30 million firm. And he said,
yeah,
absolutely not.
yeah. Oh,
Tune it up 10 degrees. So that's what I
I'm
did.
glad they said that because I feel like we would lose so much of you if you had toned it down. So I'm glad they gave you that good advice
Thank
to
you.
to be you, not to. Uh, I know you're not from Chicago originally because we did learn that you're from Mexico City, correct?
Correct. Yes, I was born there, and I came to the States when I was 14 years old.
Yeah. Tell me about it's interesting because I was born in Mexico but moved to the US at a very, very young age before I was like probably about two. So I don't have any memory of being in Mexico. Can you tell me about what that was like for you when you were really young?
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting experience for me because I was born in Mexico City, which at the time was also recognized as the largest, most populated city in the world. So you
Wow.
can imagine the hustle and bustle and the movement.
Yeah.
Then, when I was about 7 years old, my dad made the choice to move to a very small town of about 6,000 people. So, interestingly enough, that experience in Mexico, that going from the big city and reading
Mhm.
the Encyclopedia Britannica, the English
Mm.
encyclopedia, and all these amazing books in the city, and coming to a very small town, it actually created this desire to leave that town because I felt like I was asphyxiating. I was like I can't
Yeah.
change the
Yeah.
world in this town with 6,000 people. So when we came to the United States at 14, um, it was like a whole world of possibilities, and I just I became more adapted in the United States than I was able to adapt from the big city to the small
Mm.
town. So to me, it was all about the aspiration of the American dream. It was all about the possibilities and
Yeah.
what can I do, in this beautiful land of dreams. So
Yeah. And I think, we hear that story of people coming here because of the American dream or the opportunity, but I think a lot of times people see that there are still obstacles to those things, and it still takes work to really pursue that, regardless of where you're at. And what kind of one of the things that we hear often from either immigrants or children of immigrants is that the work ethic is a little different because I think there's a sort of understood, we came here for opportunity, we're going to make the most of it, and every moment you have a chance to do that. For you, did you see this in your parents, or did you feel this in your family, this sense of like, we're here to make a change in our lives and we got to work towards that?
absolutely, I think that work ethic and that perseverance and the continuity of
Yeah.
your actions, that eventually lead you to something. I, came, like I said, at the age of 14, and I had the opportunity, unlike many young people that come at that around that age, to dedicate my life to school.
Yeah.
My brothers and my parents gave me that opportunity to say, I was always like number one in Mexico, and everything that I was doing, I was like the top student, and I had scholarships even at that young age. In Mexico, they give you monetary, scholarships, even when
Uh-huh.
you're like in fifth, sixth grade, into secundaria, right? So I came with that sort of vibration of like commitment, right? And my dad always said, entrepreneurship is the way. You have to be
Yeah.
your own boss. Like, you have
Yeah.
to embrace that, and you have to have your own business. So I didn't know what type of business I was going to do in the United States, but I just knew that I had to do something. So the work ethic and the compound effect of
Yeah.
making every day count. You know, unfortunately, sometimes we give up, right? Because we say, well, I'm doing this over a period of time and I don't see any results. And I think, that's why people say patience is a virtue, right? And it takes a little bit of daydreaming. It takes a little bit of, aspiration
Yeah.
and affirmations. And of course, a lot of persistence and resilience and all of those things to get you over the, I say the hump, but over the area almost like above water, right? Because sometimes
Yeah.
when you're an
Yeah.
immigrant, oftentimes it might feel like you have all the odds against you. You feel like, you're swimming against the current, and that, I didn't speak a word of English, right? So I was like, I had to start there. And
Mm.
even at the age of 14, there were times where I felt like I was like inadequate and I was way too old to learn the
Yeah.
language,
Yeah.
right? And it was interesting because I started thinking and dreaming in English, which to me honestly was like the weirdest thing in the world. And to my mom was like, hallelujah, my mom
Yeah.
was so excited. She's like, I heard and I read about people thinking and dreaming. This
Yeah.
means that you're becoming bilingual.
Right.
And that was like my first breakthrough, coming to
Yeah,
the
that's
United
like the
States. And
sign that you are competent in another language is that you like dream in that language. So I think that
even though I didn't feel it, I didn't feel
yeah.
bilingual, but because somebody else witnessing that, it gave me the confidence. So the next
Yeah.
day I came back, I'm like, I'm bilingual, or at least I'm in the process of becoming bilingual. And then I did something crazy. Within a year of arriving to the United States, I decided to choose German as my third language,
Okay,
which I
that is a
learned
little
in
crazy.
English. I'm like, you know what? If
Uh,
I can take it up a notch, then
yeah.
English will be easier, So I
Yeah.
did that, and I really got into the German. I became a German tutor. I mean, I was a weird
Wow.
Mexican that spoke German and tutored German, and
Yeah.
part of the National German Society. So that was
That's
pretty
so
awesome
cool.
experience.
Yeah, yeah. That is pretty awesome. Um, you mentioned something that I hear a lot in that is in order for you to be able to get educated and really reach for your dreams, that meant sacrifice for the other members of your family, and not just sometimes the parents, but I've seen sometimes where it's like one family member will start working at 16, not go to school, start working at 16 in order to help provide for the family so that other family members can go to school or can, go to college or do other things. And that's a really interesting concept for me because, like in the U.S., we just think that everyone goes to school until they're like you're required to go to school. The police actually come to your door, and a truant officer will come and take you to school. So it's not something that I can really that I have experience with. So for you, were there? I mean, there were. I'm assuming there were family members that made that sort of sacrifice for you, and if there were, how did that make you feel about what your opportunity was, and then also what how did that affect your understanding of education as a resource and how important it was for people to be educated?
you know, um, and these were my two older brothers, and of course my parents kind of followed suit. But my older brothers had already been here in Schaumburg, actually, Illinois.
Okay.
And as soon as we arrived, my older brother said, he knew how devoted I was to education. He knew that I was, like said, top of my class everywhere I went. He's like, you're very smart. You need to continue education. And he was the one that literally took me to high school because I
Mm,
arrived 2 months before freshman year, and he took me there. And again, I never had to worry about paying bills. I never had to worry about working. So I
yeah.
I was able to complete that, and then subsequently
Yeah.
an associates in marketing and all that stuff. But it was with their support, because they saw something in me
Yeah.
that they're like, okay, we have to work to support our parents, but I was granted, I the only child, the only girl in a family of three. And my older, my brothers are 7 and 11 years older than I am.
Okay.
So I kind of grew up like the only child in a way, and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
spoiled brat. But it was also, my mom wanted to have a little girl because they were very rambunctious and a lot of energy. And she's like, I just want to have a little girl that is like cutesy
Yeah.
little girl that. And
Right.
then
A
like
sweet
I was
little.
born, she was like, wow, you have more energy than the two boys combined and another five people, right? And
Yeah.
so, but it was like, so every day for me became, like I said, that micro moment. I always say that life and happiness is measured in micro moments. So
Mm,
I started to become aware of the blessings, and every day, if I hit a milestone, um, I would continue to advance, and to me, learning and education is the most beautiful and sublime
yeah.
gift that we can give to the world. And that's why I've published 29 books of my own, and with my publishing company, almost 300,
Wow.
because I've dedicated my life to capturing those micro moments and capturing those lessons and the intellectual property, the resources, the experiences,
Yeah.
to encapsulate and and share that with the rest of the world. And I'm kind of obsessed about that,
Yeah.
in a way.
Let's talk about micro moments for a little bit because I think uh, younger generations today are much more in touch with their emotions, their spirituality, their mental health than I
Mm,
think previous generations. And so, well, one of the things that I've noticed is that for young people, it seems like these micro moments can become huge moments. Like they get like something in the past that may have with past generations may have seemed small, may have seemed insignificant, with these generations seem huge and seem big. And whether that's the good moments or the challenging moments, it seems to be magnified. So for
mm.
you, sort of when you think about micro moments, how do you assess them, live in them, and then if it's something that is challenging, how do you move past that in order to still be able to do big things? Because I think sometimes we get caught up in those moments, and if it's not
Mhm.
the best moment, we can get caught up in those too, and we can kind of make that affect more of our life than maybe it has a right to or should.
For me, there have been a few incidents in my life that happened that sort of awaken that sense of measuring not the macro but the micro moments, and really that stems from the gratitude that I feel in my heart. I feel like during adversity I intensify my gratitude, and that came
Mm,
from specifically three moments. One was when we moved from the big city to the small town. There were two boys that basically set our house on fire, and we had a huge shelf with the most amazing books that I devoured. And that was, standing when the fire had subsided and knowing that 80% of those books were gone. It was
yeah,
one moment of complete devastation, but it
yeah,
was also the moment that awakened me to the power of knowledge and the power of experiences, where I said, I've already read these books. I know that they're burned, they're gone, but now I'm going to make those concepts come to
mm,
life. So books
Wow.
from Del Carnegie, Napoleon Hill, Zig Ziglar. Now, this came to me when I was 12. Little did I know that at the age of 21, I was going to face one of the most difficult things. And yet, at the age of 23, even more difficult, something that was going to almost take my life. When I was 21, I was diagnosed with cancer, a
Mm.
cervical cancer, and they told me I was not going to be able to have children. I married at 21. I married very young, and they had discovered this condition. And so I set on a path of, treatments, laser, like all kinds of things that you can think of,
Yeah.
and really,
Yeah.
facing the prospect of, when you hear the word cancer, you think about death.
Right.
Um, but it wasn't until I was 23 years old that I had finally started my business. I walked into an Indian restaurant. I tried one of the Indian spices that caused an allergic reaction, sending me to two different hospitals, being interviewed by 40 doctors, and discovering that I, Jacqueline Ruiz, was very lucky to have a rare condition that happens in one out of 150,000 people in this part of the hemisphere.
Mm.
And I had type 2, which was 3 cases, 3% of the cases found. So it was like winning the lottery twice. And when they
Yeah.
discovered it, it was precancer level 4. So essentially, I was born with this, a little cyst that was provoked by this amazing spice because I wanted to embrace the culture. I love
Wow.
all cultures. And it was through entrepreneurship and through the idea of embracing this beautiful culture that it saved my life, because I could have died without even knowing why. And
Yeah.
even with that surgery, at 23 years old, when I was about to graduate from college to DuPage with my marketing associates, when I had a 5-month-old baby, and all these things were happening in a brand new business, I was in a hospital bed. It makes me emotional because um, hooked up to every tube you can think of, and with the prospect of either dying in the next 2 weeks or being fed out of a tube for the rest of my life.
Mm.
Those were the two things that the doctor said, unless everything was okay, which I chose
Yeah.
number three. And I told them, like, I need to get out by next Thursday. So
Yeah.
when you ask about this, like, resiliency and this yearning for living and enjoying each moment, and this is probably going to sound amazing and sort of out of this world, but I remember having this out of body experience, and I was overflying Lake Michigan. I was at Northwestern Hospital, downtown Chicago. And, years later, I had this inspiration, this divine download to become a pilot, right? I was doing marketing for an aviation school, but I mean, from doing that to saying I'm going to be a pilot and get my
Right.
license, very different. But I
Yeah.
just felt this amazing inspiration. I didn't know why. I was traveling the world doing my keynotes, talking about my books and doing, all kinds of stuff with, two little kids, at that time, even though they told me I was not going to, my miracles and
Hmm.
businesses and my nonprofit, organization for young Latinas, all of this stuff. I'm like, how am I going to find the time to become a pilot? But it came to my heart. It was so vivid that 10 years later, I am literally the pilot in command overflying Lake Michigan
Wow.
at about the same angle and about the same distance as I was when I saw
Wow.
myself in the hospital bed.
Yeah.
I turned the controls over to my instructor, my co-pilot, and I said, I need a minute. Give him the plane controls. And I just looked over at Northwestern and remembered, like, this is the reason why
Yeah.
this seed was put in my heart.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to me, after going through that at such a young age, I said, I'm going to live every moment. I'm going to
Yeah.
dedicate my life to service. I'm going to renew my contract with God and the universe through my acts of kindness every day,
Yeah.
and I renew that gratitude contract, every single day. And part of
Yeah.
that is having a positive attitude and just expecting the best and giving the best of you every day, you know?
Yeah. And I think I'm hearing you also speak things into existence. You speak things into your life. Um,
Mm.
and I assume that's very important for you as well.
Yes. And, things, man, I was telling some family members that are visiting, like, people tell me that everything I touch turns to gold. I don't know how much of that is true or not. I do know that there's an incredible power of manifestation that I've secured, or maybe because my sense of urgency to serve and
Mhm.
to, like you said, manifest things into existence. Because I want to, if if I'm called home, I just want people to know who I was, whether
Yeah.
it's in my role as an entrepreneur, at the head of this, top agency, marketing PR agency in Chicago, or whether it's my publishing company that serves authors around the world. Every 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 opportunity to create a touch point with someone becomes an
Yeah.
opportunity for an
Yeah.
encounter, and therefore creating a micro moment of magic. So
Yeah.
to me, I'm very cognizant about that, and I there's not a day that I'm not grateful for all the roles that I have, and the fact that I came from nothing, and I've been able to achieve the American dream. I became a millionaire. I published 29 books. I've traveled to 4 continents to speak, to share keynotes, to you know spread my wings, and through
Yeah.
service. So
Yeah.
it's a beautiful thing. If I
Yeah.
was
It
grateful before when things were not ideal, I mean,
is.
now I'm like grateful times 1,000 times.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool. Um, I find it interesting. I know that you loved reading amazing literature growing up, especially influential business authors. What about these authors inspired you? Because it's so interesting. Like you don't hear about 14-year-olds that are reading some of the books that you are reading or some of the authors that you are reading. So, what inspires you about that?
You know what? It was. I always tell my mom that I'm her personal development experiment. I'm like a little personal development monster, because she, since I was the youngest and the only girl, I was always with my mom everywhere.
Mm,
So almost like the only child, right? Because my brothers were older and they were doing their own thing.
yeah.
Um, and I started actually reading way early. Uh, I don't know how, but my cousin remembers that I was reading when I was like 4 years old.
Mm,
Just she was very impressed. She's like, "Oh my God, how
yeah.
do you?" But I was always around books, and shortly after, all the books that I had around were motivational books, inspiring books, books from Dale Carnegie, Napoleon Hill, Zig Ziglar, and I was specifically touched by Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. He took 20 years to interview the top leaders of the world. I mean,
Mm,
top, top, top. And he came up with 13 different characteristics of the richest, of the people that had achieved, that kind of level of success.
yeah.
And I was mesmerized by that.
Mm.
There were some things, like the concept of the mastermind. I mean, when I was little, I was like, what in the world is that? I thought it was brain surgery. That's what I thought it was. And since then, I've read those books again and again and again, and I continue to kind of live those principles. And
Yeah.
same thing with Dale Carnegie. He created this golden book of 31 principles to live by, to create beautiful human relations.
Mm,
And I read that book when I was a little girl. I read it again. And many years after, I'm hired by the third top franchise of Dale Carnegie in the world, which is located here in
wow.
Chicago,
Yeah.
to basically do a strategic marketing plan and do their public relations campaigns. And I
Yeah.
did several projects for them, graduated from one of the leadership courses, and 35 CEOs select me as the highest human relations award from the Dale Carnegie organization. So and actually, I think I even have it. Oops. This is my tiniest little award,
Oh,
but the biggest one in my heart. And you can
yeah.
actually, it's a tiny little golden book with the 31 principles of human
Wow.
relations. And it's,
Yeah.
it's a life of, you know, trying to do your best, a life of building trust, a life of serving others with my heart. I always say that I've left like part of my heart, part of my soul, part of like with every client that I worked with, with every
Mhm.
campaign,
Mhm.
because I give it all, and
Yeah.
I try to, build that trust, and for them to know that I have their best interest in mind. And that
Yeah.
has been, you know, our formula for success, really showing up as a trusted partner. But
Yeah.
it came from those books, I didn't know
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
better,
Yeah.
right? A young
Right.
girl, but they
Well, I think it
work.
does show. I think it does show. I've always thought that children understand more than we think that they do. So when you
Mhm.
say stuff around children, they pick it up and they understand things more than we expect them to. And I think it can go both ways. Like one, you got to kind of watch what you say because you know they hear, they listen, and they know. But two, like if you put them around the right people, the right resources, the right books, the right educational TV, that they can really understand a lot, and that they can,
Mhm.
put that in the back of their brain and apply it later in life. And
Mhm.
I think it's great that you were reading those books so young, and I hope that more people are doing that. More people are exposing their children to as much of the world and as much of those kinds of things as possible.
Yeah, and you know what they say that up until what 7 years old, you have like you learn so much, like you basically
Hmm.
absorb
Right.
all of the stuff, by the age of 7, which
Yeah.
is just unbelievable, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really crazy, but what a beautiful, and I just like, if it hadn't been for those books, Nathan, like I would not be the person that I am today.
Yeah.
I would not
Wow.
have achieved what I have achieved because if you look at my ecosystem, if you look at where I came from, if you look at, even some of my family members or something, it's like, it's not, I'm an anomaly. And I
Hmm.
wish that more of us, more Latinos and more Hispanics and more women, would reach those levels. And
Yeah.
I'm on a mission, my mission is to elevate women. And I've dedicated my life to share their stories, through my books and my anthologies and
Yeah.
all of that. And I recently graduated from an accelerator program at Stanford University, from Stanford Graduate School of Business. And it was interesting because they come up with a report about Latino entrepreneurship every year. And they say that the biggest jump for an entrepreneur is, going from being a solopreneur to hiring your first employee. That's like the
Mm.
biggest hurdle.
Okay.
And it's interesting because out of all the people that operate, Latino businesses in the United States, specifically for this segment, only 9% of all the businesses have actually jumped that hurdle
Wow.
to become an employer. So there's so much more opportunity. And for me, once a mission chooses you, it's like it's part of you, right?
Yeah.
And that mission for me to elevate women goes across, my nonprofit for young Latinas ages 12 to 25, to
Mm.
the largest collection of Latina stories called Today's Inspired Latina in the world that I created in 2014
Yeah.
with 10 volumes and, close to 240 authors, to even with a plane, with my little airplane, taking people up. I've taken over 100 women up in the plane, so that they can feel that wing, beneath their wings, and
Yeah.
just the magic of flying. So it's just it's been an incredible journey, and even with
Yeah.
all the obstacles and adversities, I'm like, I'm alive, and I'm grateful to
Yeah.
God every single day for that.
Yeah. It definitely shows. We know that you are one of the few Latina sports pilots in the U.S., which is really amazing. So, kind of two things from there. Share with us what a sports pilot is, and then, um, you know, knowing that there are few Latina women doing this, and really in other industries as well. What do you think the value of uplifting women and Latina women, especially, what does that add to the social impact, to the economy, to the zeitgeist of America?
Oh my God, two amazing questions. One, the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, decided to create a new license in 2004.
Okay.
They decided to create a new license that was right below the private license for a
Uh
pilot
huh.
because of the declining population of pilots.
Oh,
As
okay.
you might know, a lot of the pilots are retiring, being
Yep.
from, the military area, or, so A sports pilot is essentially a pilot that flies light sport aircraft, which is a new category of airplanes that was also created along with a license by different manufacturers. And it's a two-seater airplane, almost like a sports car for the air.
Okay.
And you basically, the limitations is that you cannot fly at night and you cannot fly into the clouds. You
Okay.
have to have direct contact with the ground at all times.
Oh, okay.
So essentially, you fly when the weather is beautiful. That's
Yeah.
basically what it
Yeah.
means, which I mean, it's like beautiful, right? And for me, I have this amazing passion for books, right? And I just published, my 29th book in Tequila, Mexico, and it was beautiful and amazing. And then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how can I combine this passion of aviation that has changed my life with a passion of books? Because I published my first book ever in 2010, and I decided to combine the two. And in 2020, I went on an incredible journey to find other people like me, other
Uh-huh.
pilots, aeronautical engineers, air traffic controllers, you name it, military pilots, all Latina women. Now, let me tell you, it took me about 6 months with my vast network to find them.
Yeah.
And with that, I decided to create Latinas in Aviation book, where they shared, a little bit of their story and their
Wow.
background and where they came from, and that has exploded into a beautiful pathway of opportunities because now we have pilots all over the world. We have two magazines. We have a Latinas in Aviation festival that happens every year. This year is going to happen on October 1st in Maryland, in one of the most restricted airspaces in the world. And we were making
Wow.
history because this airstrip is also known as the field of firsts. A lot of
Yeah.
records have been created, and it is the longest running airstrip in the world, because even with 9/11, because there's a heavy, military, activity
Mm-hmm.
in that area, this was
Mm-hmm.
the only airstrip and airspace that remained open when the majority of others closed. So
Yeah.
we were able to celebrate Latinas in Aviation, land, 10 airplanes, a helicopter, land there and do, head military, head the FAA, and a lot of the major airlines joining us to talk about the book and talk about the stories of these women. And now we're actually coming back with volume two of the book and doing that. So it's, like I love your perspective too, and the types of questions that you ask, because sometimes those questions kind of yield, like, if you have a passion, if you love something, right, sometimes you could just ignore it, or sometimes you can surrender.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you see a common denominator with a lot of people that you interview, a lot of the entrepreneurs, it's like where they've surrendered
Yeah.
to a passion, to
Yeah.
something, right, that
Yeah.
makes, I don't know, makes their heart beep, like my daughter said when she was
Yeah.
5 years old, my heart is beeping. I'm like, you heard those and beep? She's like, yeah, it beeps when I'm happy. I'm like, wow.
Like, we better get to the doctor if your heart's beeping.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
No, I love it. Um, we know that you have an event coming up here in a couple weeks. Tell us about what's happening on August 22nd.
Oh my goodness. You know what? One other dream come true. World Leaders Forum is an initiative created by Judson University many years ago,
Okay.
close to 11 years ago. And this is an architectural, Christian university, architectural based, Christian university in
Mm-hmm.
Elgin, Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
that started bringing all these incredible leaders: Condoleezza Rice, Mark Cuban, George W. Bush, all these amazing world leaders, Presidente Felipe Calderon from Mexico, and
Mm.
many others. And my husband found, it's like, oh my God, Felipe Calderon is coming to Elgin, Illinois, right? And so we were like, wow, let's go see him. I started getting involved. I felt, this amazing connection with the university and its people and the students and the approach and all of that. Um,
Yeah.
Several years later, as I started to volunteer and help them, they invited me to be part of the board. And now they also have invited me to be a host in the World Leaders Forum Inspirational
Wow.
Series. So on August 22nd, we're bringing in Edward James Olmos to share the importance of education, the importance of our
Yeah.
Latino community, the trends, the things that he's seen, and what he thinks, the landscape of what we can do as a community,
Yeah.
obviously for the community at large. So
Yeah.
I'll be at the stage with him, interviewing him along with Rick
Wow.
Nájera, who is a Hollywood producer that is also flying in for this incredible event. And I'm honored for many reasons. One, because my heart is with Judson. Second, because our core values align beautifully,
Hmm.
the spirit of service. And third, because they have become a vessel for bringing the top leaders around the world. And, who doesn't want to be surrounded by amazingness and
Yeah.
creating those micro moments, right? And
Yeah.
so that's what I'll be doing on August 22nd. Local companies and organizations and even people that want to fly into town for this incredible historic event, of course welcome to join us and be part of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that something that people can get tickets to, or is it a public
Yes,
event? Okay.
yes, it's absolutely a public event, and the the website is judsonu.edu/WLF inspiration. So World Leaders Forum Inspiration, and that's where they
Awesome.
can get the tickets, and they're very affordable. Plus, people can also purchase tickets so that some of the students can join us as well. If you
Oh,
wanted to
yeah.
purchase a block of tickets for a few of the students,
Yeah.
and all of the proceeds go to scholarships to the Rice program and other programs at Judson University. So
Yeah.
very exciting.
Wow. It's amazing, and getting to support education is always important. So it's so cool. Um, I want to thank you so much for everything that you share with us. I think this is why we do what we do, getting to hear these stories. I mean, it's interesting. People ask me like, why do we do our podcast? Why does a law firm do a podcast? And it's like, well, this is the reason, because when other people hear stories like this, you can't not be inspired. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
My pleasure, and again, I want to thank you for creating the space because it is through conversations and
Yeah.
storytelling that we're able to continue to lift the human spirit, right? And continue to get those amazing ideas that keep the world moving and going round and round.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's exciting.
It really is. And I think, kind of to bring it back to what something you said earlier that I want to make sure people heard too, is that, you know, we do celebrate the wins, and we do celebrate that it takes work to get there, but that your gratitude increases when the challenges come, I think is really kind of mind blowing. And I think that that's really something that we want to make sure that people hear, is that, in those times, um, to increase your gratitude is very probably difficult, but there's so much value in that too.
Absolutely. And I think, for me, gratitude is the greatest accelerator to
Mm,
achieve your dreams.
yeah.
And hands down, it's like something is going bad, and immediately go back to the center and I start thinking, okay, but what is going well?
Yeah.
And then from there
Yeah.
build. You get objectivity, you get a lot of magic. And I'm known for a phrase that kind of sums up how I sort of live my life, and that is that taking off is optional, but landing on your dreams is mandatory.
Wow.
So with that perspective, a lot of magic happens every single day.
Yeah. What a quote to leave us with. So thank you so much. We want to thank our listeners for tuning in to this episode of the Bridging Chicago podcast. You can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter. Our handle is @BridgingChicago. You can also find us on LinkedIn by searching Bridging Chicago, or visiting www.bridgingchicago.com. And be sure to visit JackieCamacho.com, or visit her on Instagram, where your handle is at Politina_official. That's PILOTINA_official. or her Twitter at Jackie Amazing. Jackie, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Bridging Chicago, as produced by the SATC Solutions Center. Nothing contained in this podcast shall constitute financial, investment, legal, and/or professional advice. No professional relationship of any kind is created between you and the podcast host or guest. You are urged to speak with your financial, investment, or legal advisors before making any investment or legal decisions. Furthermore, the opinions expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the opinions of SATC Solutions Center, SATC Law, or any of its employees. This podcast is created by the hosts and guests' individual capacities. All opinions on this podcast are or have been rendered based on specific facts, under certain conditions, and are subject to certain assumptions and may not and should not be used or relied upon for any other purpose, including, but not limited to, or use in or in connection with any investment purposes or legal proceeding.